Welcome to Boston Music Explorer. I'm Dan.
I'm Jack.
And we're the Barton Brothers.
Brothers.
We're songwriters and performers that are newly based in Boston.
This podcast is our excuse to talk to people who are doing interesting things in the Boston music scene. If you're doing something cool, we want to hear about it.
If you like what you hear and want to send some love to the algorithm gods, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review. And enjoy this episode of Boston Music Explorer. Welcome to the podcast for those of you who are dropping in for the first time, and welcome back to you repeat listeners. We appreciate that. My name is Dan Barton, one half of the Barton Brothers, and like the intro says, this podcast is our excuse to talk to people we are interested in getting to know. And to that end, this has been a huge success so far. We are thoroughly enjoying ourselves and really appreciate the chance to get to know talented, hardworking people in independent music in a relaxed and conversational setting, because neither Jack or I are big handshaker, business card giver-outer types. But we hope this podcast is bringing you some value as listeners as well. And I hope we can start highlighting that aspect of these conversations as well. If that means that my introductions get a little long at times, then so be it. Today, we are going to chat with Maria Finkelmeier from Kadence Arts, which is a Boston-based nonprofit organization that incubates artistic projects, curates performances, and engages local communities through music making. We like to sit down in person and get studio quality audio whenever possible, but on this day, Jack was booked up, and I was packing to fly to Nashville for the week, so we went ahead and had this conversation over Skype, which came out perfectly audible. But just a heads up, as far as that's concerned, Maria is a percussionist and composer in her own right, and so our conversation centers around what it means to be a creative entrepreneur and how a person creates their own niche and invents opportunities for their own interests when those don't already exist in a given location. I also got to pick her brain about time management and how somebody running an organization sets aside time to compose and to be creatively fulfilled. These are things that I struggle with when being an indie artist can mean that your life gets totally consumed with administration and marketing, social media, video and audio editing, pitch emails, grant writing, whatever it is that needs to get done to get your work in front of people can become the work. It's not something that I tend to complain about too much because I enjoy a lot of those things. And I also enjoy that I don't need to be discovered and to hire booking agents and PR companies to get things done nowadays. But you can certainly see how that industry cropped up and why a lot of artists still crave that classic music industry separation of powers to get that crap off their plate. So if that's something that you struggle with, then listen on. As I'm recording this, she and I are discussing what music we should use to wrap up the episode, so I may record a last-second iPhone introduction once we settle on that. Quick interjection here. Yes, indeed, we are wrapping up this episode with one of Maria's pieces. It's called Inner Eye for marimba and lute pedal. It was written for and premiered at the Art of Asia exhibit at Boston's Museum of Fine Arts. You're going to hear us also talk about Kadence's most recent event, which was Make Music Boston, and we also reveal the programming for their upcoming x2 series, which is going to be fantastic. All right, as you were. You can reach out to her and get the latest news at cadencearts.org. That's Kadence with a K, Kadence. Kadence Arts on all social media. You can follow her work as a percussionist and composer at mariafinkelmeier.com. Email us at thebartonbrosmusic@gmail.com with any questions, comments, or guest suggestions, and we will see you next Wednesday. We got in late last night from Nashville. Obviously, you may be able to hear that I'm fighting off a cold, but Wednesday is the new day for the podcast. So see you next Wednesday. Enjoy this episode, and we will talk to you soon. This is Boston Music Explorer, and today I'm talking with Maria Finkelmeier with Kadence Arts. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. I'm super pumped to talk today.
Absolutely. And did I say that right? Is that Finkelmeier?
That's perfect.
Okay,
yes.
Excellent. So, first of all, I guess we would just give the people an introduction to who you are, where you came from, and what it is that you've built here in Boston.
Sure. So I try to keep this as succinct as possible, so I hope I can do an introduction justice. But I am a percussionist and a composer, and also what I would say an arts entrepreneur, which sounds like a very lofty term, but it's kind of this term that's been adopted by the arts sector recently. And I wear that hat proudly because I have started a nonprofit and an artist collective that have some legs here in the Boston community. I'm really proud of. So, however, everything kind of, is balanced by my background as a performer and creator of music. So my nonprofit is called Kadence Arts, and I started Kadence about 4 or 5 years ago, which just started as a collection of projects I began in response to the Boston music scene and what I felt like was missing, which was a contemporary classical music series that's super laid back and cross genre with electronics and singers and what is the quote unquote contemporary classical scene like. And I felt in Boston it was very academic. So my colleague Robert Honstein and I started the Times 2 series. We started a festival called Make Music Boston, which is on the summer solstice. And we open up the streets, parks, plazas of Boston to bring live free music to as many people as possible. And that's grown exponentially over the last 5 years. And then an educational workshop called the Beat Bus. So all of these projects were kind of separate. And I realized that was really hard to establish like all these different businesses and all these different projects. So I educated myself on how to make a nonprofit and did so. And so now we're official, which feels really good. And we're growing and we have staff and we're still super, scrappy and, working it month to month, but I'm really proud of that. So that's part of my life. And the other part of my life is as a performer, composer with an artist collective named Masari Studios. And we do large scale public art pieces that integrate projection mapping and performance, which is really fun. So I'm working a lot with technology. And then I do a lot of kind of like just the regular freelance thing, playing with orchestras, chamber ensembles. I have some solo projects. I'm recording an album of some of my own works right now. And I also teach, of course, love to give back in that way. And I teach at Northeastern. I teach a music marketing class and I teach private lessons and do a lot of guest lecturing at all the schools around the city. So it's a very eclectic and very fulfilling lifestyle.
Well, it better be, because I was going to say, needless to say, you sound a little bit busy, but it seems to be like, an amazing project. We definitely understand trying to bring all interests and activities under one roof. And so that's an impressive thing to do with Kadence and with your performing career. And how long have you been in Boston?
I've been here about 6 years.
Okay.
So I moved here in 2012 to actually work at New England Conservatory. So I got my master's degree from the Eastman School of Music, which is in Rochester, New York. I then actually moved to Sweden, which was a huge adventure and a lot of fun. Lived in the northern woods near the Arctic Circle and kind of studied and taught at a university there for a few years. Kind of learned how to form a band. We toured. I also just had the European experience, which I'm really thankful for. But that I ran out of money, to just make it really blunt, and started to apply for jobs. And I was lucky to be offered a job at New England Conservatory as a program manager in the Entrepreneurial Musicianship department, which is this new wave of like, how do we teach conservatory trained music students about a life beyond the traditional track. So that was a great job. And I was able to work with a lot of students. So I actually held that for the first 3 years of my life in Boston when I was starting these projects and like had what we would say is the side hustle, and meeting people like Matt MacArthur at the record company and trying to, what is the Boston music scene like? Asking all these questions. And so I held that position for 3 years and then left that position after I felt all of my own work was getting kind of more sufficient. And I've been on my own now for 3 years in Boston.
Talk about like, being able to teach something that you're going to put into action yourself. And I know that is a common theme from the classical musicians that I talk to. Some people really struggle with it. Some people really excel at it. But it seems that a lot of conservatory educations like give you all of the theory and the technique and just kind of set you out on your own, and are now starting to realize we need to set up these students for what a modern musical career is like. What was some of the things that you brought into that job and that you've taken away from it for your own use?
Absolutely. I think you really kind of summarized the traditional experience quite well, where it's like we're creating these phenomenal artists and thinkers and musicians, but not a lot of connection to how to apply that. And I think in that position and through my kind of freelance educator life, I talk a lot about the acceptance of defining success in many different ways, that it's okay to self-reflect and understand that your path and what makes you happy is not actually going to be the same from student to student. And that and so that's kind of the big kind of theory behind it, is that let's actually talk about what success looks like, and that isn't just winning the audition. And what about winning that audition makes you feel successful or makes that a goal in your life? And then I think it's really about just peeling back the layers, and as someone who's kind of practicing what I preach, like sharing with everybody, young people specifically, about like all of these different failures that I've had to overcome in order to get to where I am, and how it's okay to fail. It's okay to try something and for it to not work out. I think that is really hard to digest when a wrong note is detrimental to your life. So how do you say, well, I'm going to try to write this piece of music, and if it doesn't sound good, that's okay. Or if no one comes to my concert, how can I learn from that? Or, how can you kind of put yourself out there and take risks in a way that is more, what do I want to say? You can take a risk in a way that is intentional. So I try to encourage young people to take risks in ways that you might feel success at the end, you might feel failure at the end, but both of those are positive reactions, and both of those are positive. And that's really what I tried to bring to the position at NEC, and what I try to bring kind of in my life, and also try to remember in my life, because even though I have a nonprofit and artist collective and I've gotten major commissions, I still fail, and I still have to overcome a lot of valleys in my career. And how do I kind of bring myself out of those and accept those, and always see that there will be a peak in the future. And so in the position when I'm working with young people, it's really about one-on-one mentorship a ton. It's about listening to people's desires, to people's creativity. It's about creating exercises to allow musicians, specifically in the classical world, to improvise, to explore their sound in a way that isn't regurgitating what a teacher might have said is right, but what feels right to them. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Oh, I love to hear people talk about defining success on their own terms. And that's something that we've talked about here, and that I've been talking a lot about this year, because it's always a moving target. And if you're maybe someone who's kind of perpetually dissatisfied with where you are in the moment, that can really eat away at you, because you can be from the outside, you seem to be someone who's got a ton of amazing things going on, but in the middle of the day, there's so many things that you're striving for that you haven't yet achieved, that it can feel like you haven't arrived at whatever your version of success is. So, this podcast is an example of that. I've been wanting to start a podcast for years, and then I decided I had to put an episode out and start. And many other things, performances putting out a record, starting a band, starting a collective, starting a nonprofit, all these things you have to like, this might fail, and I'm willing to see that through.
And absolutely. And I think also in this kind of era, the idea of putting yourself out there, specifically with social media, like if I put something on the internet, people see it and people like digest it, and have to be okay with that type of kind of vulnerability. I think is really tough. So I applaud you to doing the podcast. Yeah, you know, it's like a huge step to like just do it. But once you do it, you realize it's not that scary, and then you can kind of assess like what's the next step from that. Hey, it wasn't that hard.
Right.
Like let's continue. And I think it's really it's actually really tough in the traditional education system to like empower that risk taking, and that just like there's so much fear in that vulnerability. But that's when I feel the most excitement, is when I'm most vulnerable and I'm come on the other side of that, and you really feel like you actually made an impact because of that kind of rawness of what you're trying to do.
That's an interesting conflict, just thinking about how academia really doesn't encourage a lot of risk taking, and you know, that being in direct conflict with trying to build a career as an artist. You know, a lot of an academic path is one about following the rules and staying on the track, and eventually you'll like arrive at, you know, this like certain upper echelon that was like for a long time defined as like the success of academic music.
Right.
And it's really inspiring to see that you kind of embraced that conflict and turned it into opportunities for yourself. And talking about our conversation with Matt MacArthur, like the Record Co. talks a lot about how Boston is trying to find a music identity, and it currently is maybe a classically heavy music identity, and he's trying to build up the rock and the pop and the hip hop. But even it goes even closer than that, because as a contemporary classical musician, you might not even feel at home, because Boston is not just a classical music city, it's an early classical music city.
Exactly.
And so everyone's trying to build their own opportunities. And
absolutely. And I think, you know, it's interesting when Matt and I do talk, because I feel some of the same frustrations that he does, even though I shouldn't. In theory, if you saw my career on paper, you're like, oh, Boston should totally embrace what you do. But I also am outside of academia. I did work at NEC for a while, but I worked in my bubble of it. And I wasn't, you know, I didn't go to school there. And for this city, if you're not a part of an institution, it is actually very hard to find an identity. And I think that's what Matt's trying to do with the record company, is like saying, we are beyond what the institutions say we are. We are people that live here and breathe here and make here, and, you know, and enjoy this city. And how do we kind of break through that institutionalized kind of grandeur of what we are? And I think we're chipping away at it, though, which I think is kind of exciting. Which was really a lot of the inspiration for the nonprofit. Like, a lot of those projects wouldn't have come into existence if I didn't feel that rub of like, where do I belong? I don't really belong anywhere here. So like, let's make a place I belong. Which it's frustrating on one turn, you know, that I really, even as an extroverted person, felt like, where are my people? Where do I fit in? But on the other side, if I didn't feel that frustration, I would have never had the drive to create what I've created. And then a lot of also what I love about like contemporary classical music is that it really isn't as tied to the classical tradition. It's just, we don't really know what to call it. Right.
Great point.
So we're just kind of tied to this tradition that we're all trying to like say, you know, we respect. And I've played in orchestras, and I love playing in orchestras. I love playing new music in orchestras made by living people. That's so exciting to me. So how do I kind of grapple with that kind of, what do I want to say, balance of really respecting how I was taught and grew up, but also saying, all right, let's build into this century.
Come on, everybody, this way.
Come on, let's go. Jump on the wagon.
Absolutely. Well, I could talk about these like day-to-day indie music struggles all day, but we should transition into what that means for your life right now. So
Sure.
Cadence just finished putting together Make Music Boston, right? How did that go?
Mhm. It went great. I'm so proud of that project because it started with, 4 friends. We were mentored a bit by the Make Music New York organization, which is great. They said, "Hey, you're in Boston. Like, this is what we do here. We're trying to make this national, an alliance that's national. This festival happened in Paris, started in the 1985. It is international, but the United States really hasn't grabbed onto it. Boston should be a part of this." And I was like, "Yeah, let's do it." And I loved the idea of like live music projects, any genre being kind of overcoming the city. I just loved that visualization on the first day of summer that we just celebrate. And it's non-curated. It's whoever wants to participate. It's amateurs, it's professionals, it's all these things. So that first year, we had like $200 out of my pocket, like a lot of volunteers. And we had about 30 events around the city. The Parks and Rec department worked with us. We had, some people that made signs for us. We had a beautiful feature in the Boston Globe, which was phenomenal. And we were I remember that first year in 2014, just running around, sweating, not really enjoying any of the music because I was like, is it all happening? Oh my gosh, what are we doing? But it was successful, and we did, we did our best. And since then, we've been able to fundraise a bit more. Now there's a team behind it. And this year we had 85 concerts, over 350 musicians. And we're starting to do like larger projects where we had a gentleman named Devin who curated the Boys and Girls Club of Mattapan, took them to Magazine Beach in Cambridge and did a whole night of hip hop and kind of poetry and an amazing music event there. So we're able to actually support now these like community connecting projects. We had an ensemble near the Edgar Allan Poe statue that took 50 bells and handed them out to people as they walked by and improvised on violins and vibraphones. So we're able to do these kind of larger projects now, which I'm really pumped about, and like really ask the community, like, what are things you want to do in the city? We'll help you make that happen. And for me, being that catalyst is super energizing. And yeah, we still feel scrappy though. We're still, we're still trying to fundraise to make this actually, to the height in which I feel like it should be. But everybody works on it with such passion and such determination that I think in the next few years we'll really be at a place that feels good and sustainable. But yeah, it's grown every year, and we're just still trying to make it even bigger.
Yeah, well, that's so exciting, especially that it's starting to reflect, Boston specifically in some of the events that are putting together, and not just pop-ups around town.
Right.
And that's so exciting to see it kind of reflect the communities more. Thank you to that. Motorcyclist on my window.
Awesome.
And then, but just thinking about the amount of heavy lifting involved to get it from zero sounds amazing, because we're from Colorado originally. So when I saw that this is an international thing, I'm like, oh, has Denver done this? And I think they did it maybe once in 2016 and not since then. And you could see how you could try it once and just like not have the energy or the funds or the people to keep it going. Right. So that's so exciting to see it like, getting support and building momentum.
Yes.
And then in addition, you are close to announcing the upcoming season of your ×2 series, right?
Yes, we're super excited about that, which also has a connection with Matt MacArthur. Yay! Because it's kind of the birth story of this project was my colleague Robert Hunstein, who's this phenomenal composer, and kind of creates music that I love because it really is this classical adjacent contemporary cross genre aesthetic. And he and I would just talk about like, we're going to these concerts, we're not getting super inspired. Like, how can we create the inspiration that we want to feel, because we think other people will want to feel this inspiration? And We're like, we want to find the venue that's like, has a piano, has a PA system. People can hang out. We can have beer. Like we can have like a chill vibe that the artists can talk to the audience. And we want to curate the artist. We don't want to curate in the classical world. You like say, we're going to program this piece and then this piece and then this piece. We just want to say and then you find the artist. We want to say, we really love this person or this band or this ensemble. Come and play 40 minutes. And we also love the idea of picking someone from Boston and then someone from somewhere else. So times two is really about like two groups coming together, two artists coming together, and that we see some sort of through line. They might have worked together in the past. They might have no idea who each other are, but you're getting a double bill that is curated by Robert and I. And we searched for a good year around the city. Like, where is this? Where can we host this? Like, where is the right vibe? Where's the right spot? And we went to art galleries and we didn't really jive with any of them. We went to like the traditional venues. And then I had started to work with Matt a bit, and I was like, do you do shows in the studio? And I should also have a side note that they really don't do shows in the studio, but we have kind of made them live recording sessions, essentially, for the shows, in which we're able to invite people into the space. We curate the 2 acts, and everyone just kind of chills and hangs out, and we have nice lighting, and we have this like really organic experience. So everyone who's specifically come from out of town is like, this is the vibe. Like, this is the vibe we want with this type of music, where it is concertized. People are sitting quietly and listening, but they're also like chatting in between pieces, and the artist is like explaining their inspiration or the backstory of the piece, and then grabbing a beverage in between. That feels really good. So it's been a labor of love as well, but we're able to pay the artists a lot more than we used to and really support it and have pretty good PR these days. So a couple of people I'm really excited about, I'll share if you don't mind, for the upcoming season, is a violinist, a kind of composer arranger named Lev Zurbin, who's this Russian fella You might. He's phenomenal. He's arranged for the Silk Road Ensemble. He has like a million projects. So he's going to come up and do his 6-string violin looping solo set, which is going to be phenomenal. And we're actually pairing him with this local folk-inspired band that is recent graduates of NEC, a band called Night Tree. And it's going to be members from Night Tree with a harpist named Mari Chambule, and they're going to create some like new improvised music. And what I love is Lev's music is very, very inspired by his Russian heritage, and Night Tree members and this harpist are very, very inspired by each of their folk aesthetics. So it's kind of contemporary music with a big folk flair that I think is going to be super, super special. So that's going to be our season opener on October 26th. And then some other artists. We have a new duo called Big Dog, Little Dog, which is a duo project of, I know, right? Isn't that a great name? Great. It's a great name. And it'll make more sense because it's violinist composer Jesse Montgomery and bassist songwriter Eleanor Oppenheim. So violin, small dog, bass, big dog. Anyway, Eleanor's played on the series with other projects before. And what I love is we're also the series that's like, hey, I have a new project. Can we come play? And we're like, yes, because we trust you as artists, and we know it's going to be amazing. So I've known these 2 women are phenomenal in the New York scene, and I think they'll really, really make something great. And so they'll be in the spring. And we also in the spring are going to feature a composer, build with them, because they're kind of songwriter composer performers. And we have a local composer performer named Dan Van Hassel, who has created a new band that's guitar and piano and marimba, and I think saxophone is the 4th member. And so he's a composer that has composed in the kind of traditional academic field. And this is his like breakout into more cross-genre music. So, and he's also going to be performing. So it's also this exploration and composer performers. And what does that look like to have the creator and the performer on the stage at the same time? So those are two of the highlights from this year. I'm super pumped. The other is actually going to be a concert of my music.
Yay.
We're doing a director showcase, so I'm excited.
Is this the first time you've snuck yourself into the programming, or?
It is. I think last season, Robert and I were like, let's use this platform. We've really created a platform for other artists that we love. Let's highlight some of the work we're doing. So Robert did an album release last year.
Okay.
I'm going to do an album release this year. And I'm just really thankful to be able to share my music with this network of people that we've kind of grown into a community. So that'll be in December. And then we're going to have a super hip electronics concert with the Art of the Loop, this band called the Art of Loop, and this band called Forever House. And that'll be our season closer.
Right.
So it's going to be super fun. And I'm getting so excited just talking about it because I want to go to all the shows.
That's a fantastic season. What's the style of the music that you've been working on that is going to be played here?
So that's a great question. Thank you for asking. So it's gonna, I just dabble in a lot of these different aesthetics. So it's kind of a kind of representation of all these different kind of aesthetics, for lack of a better term, that I've been really passionate about. So the first third of the album is two percussion quartets that I've written for marimba, vibraphone, and drums. And that's kind of homage to my training, like very kind of intricate writing, marimbas, vibraphones, and kind of the music that I grew up with is percussion ensemble.
Right.
So, quartet kind of written out music. The second portion is going to be, it's percussion duo with projection. So my Masari Studios work, which that music is super groovy, drum set, marimba melodies, bass lines. I sing a little bit. There's keys, that's kind of going into the band aesthetic.
Okay.
And we just finished making some music videos for those. So I'm super excited to share those. And then the third part is my improviser hat. And I'm working with a poet and saxophone player named Tim Hall. So we've created a set of works that is his spoken word plus marimba, saxophone, some drone sounds with electronics. And while there's structure to them, they are improvised.
Cool.
So, so kind of these three hats. I don't know what to call the album yet. I'm just because there's not like a storyline throughout the whole album. So if anyone has any ideas, let me know.
This is the public call.
Exactly.
And yours is in December, you said?
It is in December 6th.
Wait for that. That's fantastic.
Yeah. I hope you come. Please come.
Absolutely. And this will still be at the Record Co. Studios?
We are thinking about moving that one to a bit of a larger venue because needing projection and a lot of instruments. So we'll be announcing that. It'll be very apparent what the venue is
Gotcha.
online. So we have some conversations going.
Okay, great. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But the other concerts of the season will be?
Yes.
Great.
Record company. Yeah.
I mean, that wound up, I'm glad that the vibe is good, but just logistically thinking about how much work it takes to put together a contemporary classical, showcase, recital, performance of any kind, and how often they aren't taped or recorded, how they just like disappear into the ether. And so smart that, you're set up in a place that's fully set up to like have, a beautiful, beautiful recording, which I'm sure has served as like excellent marketing for the next series. So in a lot of ways, that's been a great thing.
It is a great space. And when you also just think of like the technology that we need and everything's in house, it just makes so much sense. We always get a great live engineer who, we're working with a lot of funky electronics, sometimes some backtrack stuff. And they're always super flexible and really amenable to our needs, which is cool. And the artists love getting the recording, and we get great photos and a lot of good kind of cozy community vibes, which I think artists want. We want to connect with the people listening, and there's a lot of good connection always.
Yeah, absolutely. That winds up being good for everybody, and especially when you're trying to build a brand and fundraise and all these things, really having the best showcase of what you're capable of is fantastic as well.
Totally. Yeah. Thanks.
I guess the one thing that made me think of, if I could go on a brief tangent,
yes,
is with all of the logistical things that have to happen with you putting these things together, I'd like to talk about time management and when on earth you find or make or set aside time to actually be a composer. How do you create the headspace to say, this is still a part of my life, I need to work on an album?
That is a phenomenal question. So
one with the easy answer.
So easy. Here's the solution. So I've observed with my own life that time management strategies just have to ebb and flow over time. And I think that actually goes back to my philosophy of defining and redefining success. And I'm a very project-based brain. So when I have deadlines, I'm on it. I can, totally strategize really well. I also am a person that needs to talk through ideas with other people. So that works really well with my artist collective and with the nonprofit, because I have a team, and I can be what about this? What about this? I have this idea. What do you think? So when it comes to the project management, the ideation, and the proposals for projects, that's all beautiful. And I have to work very, very, very hard to hold time to be by myself, to compose, and to practice. And especially in my adult life, where I feel a lot of pressure to meet these administrative deadlines and to worry about my students, etc. So it's actually shifted in the past year, but where I have some golden hours that I reflect upon. I'm okay, my brain right now is the best in the afternoon. So I'm really trying to hold afternoon time to write and to I will turn off my phone. I will turn off Wi-Fi on my computer if I'm composing, because I can't have notifications. I can't have the urge to go to Facebook. And I will take 2-hour chunks where it is just the time that I'm either composing or on my marimba playing. I can't have electronics open when I'm practicing. And in the past, it's actually been the morning hours. And I've just realized that now I need the morning hours to do meetings that feels really good. So I'm always constantly reflecting on what is my body telling me, what is my routine telling me, which in this lifestyle, routine is very hard. So there's something I have to do to hold some routine. And for me right now, that's holding a couple afternoon hours to play or to compose. I have to assess every week as it comes. The week of Make Music Boston, I'm not going to write music. I'm not going to play a drum. I'm not going to do anything else except make sure that all the fires are put out and all the artists feel comfortable. So I just have to accept that. If we're working on a major commission with Masari Studios, it's kind of a tech week or tech month sometimes, where I just have to hold the time. And so I just have to be flexible in that. And then I always look right now, my checklist on my whiteboard is from now until December. Here are the pillars of what I need to hit, and how do I make sure that I am kind of managing my time enough. So I have to be scheduled, but I also have to be super flexible. And that's always this weird balance. I think getting an education in music actually helped me with that a lot, because we were always taking a million classes. I did a ton of side projects throughout school. So I always kind of had this desire to to have a lot of things going on. So I do think that helped me. And then also just talking to people about it is really helpful. Just being like, what are you doing right now? And I could have never been a solo pianist because I can't spend that much time alone. So talking things out with people is really helpful for me. And it's really hard sometimes. And again, sometimes I fail at it too. I decided to release this album this year, and it's been hard because it's taken a lot of work, but I had to make that decision for myself to say, you're going to do this. And something's going to happen. Like, you shared it with the world. You invested in these recording sessions. Like, here you go. So it's also that pressure of taking that risk, like making the podcast. I did it. So I need to do it again. Okay.
Exactly.
That actually helps my time management at times, because I'm putting that project pressure on myself.
Absolutely. Well, these are all great things to hear. I mean, just these are like selfish questions for me personally, because I'm really craving routine in a time that I'm not able to find a lot of it. And, creative types, Jack and I also like have a million different projects going on. And sure. I will only speak for myself and not him, but have the tendency to be really hard on myself if I have 10 things that I want to do, and maybe I do 6 out of 10. All I can think about is being hard on how I didn't compose that day, how I haven't written a song in a couple of weeks. I don't, talking about defining your own success, I don't pat myself on the back for the things I did check off. It's only like, why didn't I make time for this? Why didn't I make time for that? Yeah. And so with all these things, with a podcast, with an album that we're recording and making, with trying to put together live shows, all these things that you're doing, it's, like you said, listening to your body and assessing what times of day you're at your best to do different types of tasks seems to be a really important thing. So you're not in addition to how busy we all are, that you're not swimming upstream against a time of day that your body doesn't want to be doing writing or meeting or anything like that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And just also holding some time for family and friends. I know that sounds super cliche, but understanding that is actually healthy. What took me a long, long time, and only in recent years has been okay, this is actually making me a better creator when I feel like I have some time with that isn't music related.
Right. You have to have something else non-creative going on in your life so that it can inform what you're doing, or else you're just a music robot, which is
totally.
And then also just kind of for the general public, as someone who has found a lot of success creatively and as a performer, but also as a creative entrepreneur, go if you want to go into professor mode and just kind of talk to somebody who is either a singer-songwriter or a opera singer or some type of up-and-coming creative that is not seeing a place for themselves and wants to be able to create their own opportunities. What are places to get started when you're not seeing a home and want to create one yourself?
It's a great question. I think the angle I would like to take on this question is actually refers to the idea of personal relationships in our industry, and that I talk a lot about social media with my students and our perceived personas, our real personas. What is marketing? What is branding? How does that feel icky to a lot of people? And always coming back to the idea that a one-on-one connection is still at the core of art making and music making. For example, I'm so excited to meet you.
Likewise.
This is great. And I can already think of ways that our work is going to intersect many times in the future. So, and this took a long time for us to work out.
Yep.
And I'm so happy it did. And the fact that we both put energy into making this work is actually going to help us build a community and help us, who knows what, create something, who knows what that is. But I think when specifically you're just starting out in your career, the you don't feel like you belong, I want you to ask yourself, why don't you feel like you belong? And then putting yourself out there to those spaces in which you don't feel like you belong. When I first moved to Boston, for the first 6 months I was here, I didn't know, I knew a couple people through just life, but I didn't, it was like, oh, you should go meet this person. But I went to so many concerts and just absorbed and try to understand the space that I was living in. Because I could research it online. I could follow people on Instagram. I could, get hearsay information, or I could just go and experience it. And that physicality of me shaking hands and listening and creating my own opinions about what was going on was the foundation for my education on then to how to understand who I was really. So I was better able to frame my intentions and what I wanted to do based on understanding the community that was around me. So I think it's really hard when you leave a university or conservatory environment, because you're told where to go.
You have the built-in community, and
it's right there. And as soon as you step out of those doors, you can fall back on that community, but it isn't going to actually propel you. So going out and meeting as many people. And I think I learned that also when I moved to Europe, because I had to put myself out there. I also had to learn to talk about yourself. So if you're meeting new people that have never met you, they didn't go to school with you, and they're in the art world, you have to say, and here's who I am. And that practice is exactly that. It's practice. It's saying, oh, I introduced myself in this way. Was that really what I wanted to say about myself? And I think the more I did that, the more I was, and it's shifted. If I would go out, and when I go out and meet new people, it's, the way I introduce myself is completely different than I did 6 years ago. But I think if you don't do that when you're young, then you all of a sudden become very secluded, and then you do feel like you don't belong. But the more I meet my community, the more, while I'm building my own community, they still all like intersect in some way. So that is kind of my emotional kind of perspective on that question. I think also the practical answer to that question is have your kind of materials, like write about yourself, whether that's a bio or a resume, while you're in school, to start to understand what all of your experiences mean. That I think is something that we get so sucked into, going, doing all your concerts, writing your songs, just trying to keep up with academia, that you don't have time to actually reflect on what you've done. So I really encourage young people to like write down, whether that's typing or writing, write your bio, try to understand what your experience has meant, because that will also then help you if you have your kind of materials together. You'll be able to grow them, as opposed to start fresh when you're 2 years out of school and be like, oh crap, I need a resume. What does that even mean? So
that's great practical advice for classical musicians for sure, who are inclined to just list the people they've studied with and the places that they've been. If you're a violinist, I don't know these violin professors. Like, tell me who you are, tell me what you've done. And so thinking about like your life, and not just like, listing, not just putting your resume into sentence format, is really thinking about your own story, and then learning how to talk about it. Like you said, practicing how to introduce yourself. I got how I best learned to do that was when I was living in New York before I moved here. Working in restaurants, doing administrative jobs, you're so inclined to like, you meet people at a bar. What do you do? Like, they don't want to know what restaurant you work at. Like, no, it's like, they want to know. So I had to learn to say I'm a composer, because they would say I make jewelry. They wouldn't talk about like, whatever their day job is. Like, everyone kind of in that age range in that city is like there to do something creative or entrepreneurial. Like, nobody I know you work at a restaurant. Like, that's not what I'm asking about. Like, they want to know what you're up to. And so getting that, like you said, it is practice, and being brave enough to say, like, introduce yourself as what you're aspiring to do and what you like, what the meaningful work is really great.
Absolutely. Yeah. And actually those types of ways to practice are even better.
Yeah.
Like, you know, just how do you talk to your Aunt Sue's cousin about what you're doing? You know, how do they get it? Ask yourself that, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Whether or not they approve is a different story, but do they get it?
Totally different podcast. Yeah.
100%. Well, let's see. I should collect some cats, and we're about to head to the airport to go to Nashville for the CD Baby
Awesome.
DIY Musician Conference. That's going to be a great week.
That's awesome. I would love to connect with you after and hear about what you learned.
Absolutely. We went last year and learned a ton, and so we wanted to go back, and you know, a lot of it has stuck with me since then. Hopefully I go back feeling like I put some things into action. I always said it'd be like heartbreaking to go back to the conference. I'm like, wow, I took a lot of notes that I didn't do anything with a year ago. Why did I pay to come here? So you really want to come away and then put the things you learn into action. But I'd love to talk about that.
Great.
So I guess I'll wrap up. Like, where can people find you online? How can they get in touch? And is there anything else that you'd like to promote before we hop off?
Sure. So you can find me online at www.mariafinkelmeier.com, and that's Finkelmeier.
Oh, that's good.
Mickey Mouse song, right? And I'm on all social medias at Maria Fink Perk, PERC. And the nonprofit is Kadence Arts with a K, KADENCEARTS.org. And my collective is Masari Studios, MASARY Studios.com. But all of it's linked to my personal stuff. And I hope, the album will come out in late October, probably.
Yeah, let's be real.
Well, exactly. So I hope to see, there's ×2 information is always on my social media and upcoming concerts. So I so appreciate this time. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Can't wait to see you out and about.
Absolutely. Take care.
All right. See ya.